fight for the unborn. The Senate Majority Leader says lawmakers will consider 2 pro-life proposals in the coming weeks, while Democrats discuss abortion on the campaign trail. McCarrick report. New developments in the case of the former American Cardinal who was laicized after being found guilty of sexual abuse. Deadly outbreak. Officials in China have troubling news about the spread of the coronavirus. And family and friends. Pope Francis tells the faithful how a smile can become powerful. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, February 14th, 2020. Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Donald Trump isn't backing down from his plan to build a border wall. He says the government has already constructed 122 miles of wall and he expects 400 miles to be completed by the end of the year.
I thought I could put up a nice simple concrete wall. It would be so nice I'd just get it done. They have to make it complicated. This project was complicated, but I said if we're going to do it, we have to do it right.
The president told members of the National Border Patrol Council the new wall is made of steel and poured concrete, and it has slats so agents can see through. Part of the funding is coming from the Defense Department, which diverted money from other military programs. But the president says his strategy is working. Illegal border crossings are down over 75% since last spring. He blames Democrats for supporting open borders. President Trump says he maintains the right to weigh in on legal cases, even though his attorney general asked him not to. William Barr broke with his boss yesterday, saying the president's tweets were making it impossible for him to do his job. Democrats like Representative Sheila Jackson Lee accused Barr of overriding the responsibilities of the Attorney General's office. The flap started when President Trump criticized the prison sentence recommended for his friend Roger Stone. All the federal prosecutors assigned to the case resigned in protest after their recommendation was overruled by Barr's Justice Department. This week, Democrats running for president saw their first solid results from voters. Senator Bernie Sanders claimed first place in Tuesday's New Hampshire primary, but one name not on the ballot was former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg. He is now causing a stir among both his fellow candidates and pro-life Americans for different reasons. Catholic news agency's Matt Hager reports now from Capitol Hill.
Good evening, Tracy. That's right. Democrats are now increasingly taking aim at Michael Bloomberg, a latecomer to the race. Today marks Bloomberg's 78th birthday, but the Democratic presidential candidate seems intent on telling voters that he is focused on winning.
All of my success in life, everything I've done, is thanks to the strong women around me. Women's rights are under attack.
Wednesday, Mike Bloomberg issued a statement supporting legal abortion and criticizing President Trump's pro-life policies. The former mayor writes, "As president, I will fiercely protect a woman's right to choose, and I will appoint judges who will defend that right. On my first day in office, I will reverse the damage President Trump has done to women's rights and ensure that every woman has access to reproductive health care." It's a sentiment his rival, Senator Amy Klobuchar, shares. She also promises to reverse President Trump's pro-life protections. For the field of Democratic candidates coming out of New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders has a slim lead over Pete Buttigieg. Amy Klobuchar comes in third. Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden round out the leaderboard. And they want to discredit rival Mike Bloomberg and his sizable personal bankroll.
We know in our hearts that in a democracy, it is not about the loudest voice or the biggest bank account. It is about the best idea and about the person who can turn those ideas into action.
Klobuchar made headlines this week for saying she'd try to find common ground on bringing down the number of abortions, although her voting record shows she has consistently supported legal abortion. Bloomberg and his ex-wife have been divorced since 1993. Since 2000, he has been living with his partner, Diana Taylor, and in a 2011 interview with the New York Observer, Taylor described herself as, quote, rabidly pro-choice. Voters in Nevada will have the next opportunity to whittle the Democratic field as the caucuses in that state are held on February 22nd. At the Capitol, Matt Hadro, EWTN News Nightly.
The United States and the Taliban have reportedly reached a peace deal that will happen, quote, very soon, just as the U.S. Secretary of State met Afghanistan's president.
Gentlemen, are you optimistic about a peace deal?
No response to reporters' questions from either Secretary Mike Pompeo or President Ashraf Ghani. A 7-day agreement on reducing violence with the Taliban looks like it could happen any day. They met on the sidelines of the annual Munich Security Conference. The humanitarian disaster in northern Syria continues to grow by the day. And the United Nations says it is the biggest single mass displacement since the war started 9 years ago. Civilians are dealing with cold and snow in makeshift camps. Over 140,000 refugees fled the fighting in the last few days, and more than half are estimated to be children. The refugees say they escaped airstrikes by Russian forces and have nothing. The Syrian government launched an offensive against the rebels in December. In Haiti, a fire at an orphanage kills 15 children, including infants and toddlers. The orphanage is run by the Christian group, the Church of the Bible Understanding, based in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Workers say a fire swept through the orphanage last night, and it took firefighters an hour and a half to get there. The orphanage was using candles for light because of problems with its generator. A Catholic priest was kidnapped in Nigeria today. It is the latest in abductions of Catholic clergy and seminarians. His name is Father Nicholas Obo of the Diocese of Orami. Several children were also reportedly kidnapped along with him. The president of Nigeria has said that he is shocked at the unabated killing of Christians in the country. For more on the story, including a look at recent attacks on church leaders in the country, be sure to visit our partners at CatholicNewsAgency.com. China says more than 1,700 doctors and health workers are sick with the coronavirus, and 6 have died. It is the first time that China is releasing information on doctors and nurses. Overall, the outbreak has killed 1,400 people, virtually all of them in the Hubei province. Since China changed the way it counts the sick, the number of cases nearly doubled this week. And Japan is now reporting its first death, but some of the elderly passengers on that cruise ship are being allowed to disembark for the first time since it was quarantined 2 weeks ago. Joining us now via Skype to discuss this deadly outbreak is Claudia Rosett, Foreign Policy Fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Claudia, thanks for joining us right now. Claudia, what do you think of China's...
Thank you.
What do you think of China's handling of this deadly outbreak so far?
It's been monstrous. I mean, toward the people of China especially. This is all about protecting the ruling Communist Party of China, not really about taking care of the people of China, certainly not about us.
Claudia, has the country's communist structured political system, has it hampered an effective response to the virus?
Yes, I mean, there's no free speech in China. They're censoring, arresting, harassing, disappearing people who criticize how they're handling this. And one of the reasons it reached the proportions it's now got is that when a young doctor tried to warn his colleagues in late December, China and forced him to sign a document saying he was rumor mongering and wouldn't do it anymore. And that's there's just a desperate lack of transparency in what's really going on. That's terrible.
Claudia, thank you so much. We're having a little bit of audio issues, but we thank you for your time. Claudia Rosett, Foreign Policy Fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Coming up, new details on the Vatican's report into former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick. The Archbishop of Washington orders the coat of arms of disgraced former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick be removed. The coat of arms of all the Washington archbishops hang on a wall at the Cathedral of St. Matthew the Apostle in the nation's capital. Archbishop Wilton Gregory made the decision to remove it when he arrived in D.C. last year. McCarrick was stripped of his public ministry after being found guilty of crimes which included sex abuse. Chicago's Cardinal Blaise Cupich, former chair of the Bishops' Committee on the Protection for Children and Young People, says that the McCarrick report is expected to come out in March.
What's important about that report is that there is a disclosure of what happened. I think that's important, but it's part of the transparency that the Holy Father has pledged the Church to in this moment. We have to make sure that we do that.
At the 5th graduation ceremony in safeguarding of minors held in Rome, Cardinal Cupich said that we have to make sure to create a culture of safeguarding in all of our churches and go beyond one instance, one particular individual. 25 students received their diploma today, giving them the skill to establish safe environment programs in their diocese and to create a global network of safeguarding in churches around the world. Pope Francis shares with U.S. bishops his concerns with the reaction on the apostolic exhortation based on the Synod on the Amazon. The church leaders met with the Holy Father on Monday and Thursday to give their 5-year report and talk about any concerns. Archbishop Samuel Aquila from the Archdiocese of Denver sat down with EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief Alan Holdred. He gave some insight into his conversation with the Pope and what the Holy Father truly thinks about the Synod on the Amazon region.
In your meeting with the Pope, did you have a chance to speak with him personally, to ask him a question?
We discussed the whole question around transgenderism and how to handle that, and also the very real concerns that we have in terms of how things are being presented on transgenderism. And the Holy Father was very clear. He said, this is one of the great challenges in the United States right now. And he said, the other is abortion. And so those are the two, and both of them really deal with the dignity of human life and the understanding of human life. And do we truly receive from our Creator, from God, the gender that He has given to us, and that there are only two genders, male and female. And so how do we open our hearts to receiving that as gift? He also spoke of the media and how the far left goes after him and the far right goes after him, and neither one really presents who he is.
And who does he say he is? Did he present himself in a different way?
I mean, he has a very, very deep faith. I mean, he is convinced of the gospel. He is totally convinced of Jesus Christ. He is convinced that there are teachings in the church that can never change, and that we have to be faithful to the church. And even in the understanding of synodality, which he spoke about, he said it always has to be sub Petro and cum Petro, under Peter and with Peter. And that synods cannot just be going off and creating things that they want done. And because he made very clear that it's not synodality in the Catholic understanding. And so he spoke, there are very clear teachings that cannot be changed. And so that was very reassuring and all.
And you are here this week, even though that meeting with the Holy Father took place on Monday and the apostolic exhortation came out on Wednesday, but that was an important moment in the life of the Church to conclude the Synod for the Amazon, the release of that document, which is the Pope's final statement on the Synod. Did he say anything about that document specifically and about the release of the exhortation?
He had brought it up to us that he was going to release it, and with that he brought up too the question of celibacy, and he said, my primary concern is that the gospel be proclaimed in the Amazon, and that all of us need to focus on Jesus Christ and the proclamation of the gospel first, because if we proclaim the gospel and are faithful to the gospel, then vocations will come forth.
Thank you so much, Archbishop Aquila.
You're very welcome. Good to be with you.
Up next, Pope Francis says our families are more than just parents and siblings. We'll explain. Plus, we hear about the rally for the unborn in Virginia.
pensare a questa famiglia che ci accompagna.
Pope Francis asks us to cherish those who accompany us in life. At his daily mass at the Vatican, the Holy Father says families are not only parents and siblings, but also classmates and co-workers. He says patience and apologies come with being a family, but that smiles and greeting are like seeds that reach everyone's heart. Senators are set to vote on 2 pro-life bills in the coming weeks. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell made the additions to the schedule yesterday. The Senate will consider a measure to ban abortion after 20 weeks, as well as the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. Both proposals would need 60 votes to pass. In Kansas, some Republicans are arguing against an expansion of Medicaid, saying that it could pay for abortions, but the Senate Majority Leader disputes that and says that is not accurate. Pro-life lawmakers have been trying to pass an amendment to the Kansas state constitution declaring that it does not guarantee the right to abortions. They're promising to block any Medicaid expansion until a pro-life amendment is put on the ballot for voters to approve in November. Several hundred pro-lifers rallied in the rain yesterday in the capital of Virginia at the state's 2nd annual March for Life in Richmond. Speakers encouraged people to be more active in the fight for the unborn. The rally goers are also hoping to push back against the Democrat-controlled State House, which has passed bills to strengthen abortion. Virginia's Governor Ralph Northam says that he supports the measures. Joining us now is Amy McInerny, Director of Respect Life for the Catholic Diocese of Arlington. Amy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. It's just a joy to be with you.
Oh, we love that you're here. So yesterday was a damp day out there, but the rain didn't seem to, keep people away.
It didn't. It did not dampen the spirits and the enthusiasm of the thousands of pro-life Catholics and other Virginians of goodwill who came out and rallied in peaceful, prayerful protest at the Capitol in Richmond.
How much was the event tied to Virginia's recent attempts to pass the pro-abortion legislation?
Well, it was very closely tied. As I know you've reported, on January 29th, after some very disturbing legislation began to move its way through our General Assembly, the bishops of Virginia called on Catholics to step into the public square. And in fact, we did that literally yesterday, thousands of us, and the raindrops did not dampen our spirits.
Great. Can you talk a little bit about those measures for those who may not be familiar with them?
Absolutely. This is an attempt to strip Virginia law of protections that have been in place for decades, saving lives. Protections that really help unborn children and their mothers, common sense health and safety regulations. So, for example, 24-hour waiting period from the time you first encounter the abortion provider to the time that the abortion is procured. The provision that abortions should be performed by a physician, and also the ultrasound requirement that a woman be able to see her unborn child before she makes an irreversible decision. And so now we have bills moving through our General Assembly which are poised to strip these protections away from Virginia's unborn children and women. And so we needed to raise our voices.
So what are people saying? I'm sure you heard a lot of people talking about it, especially yesterday. What are they saying about those measures?
Well, it's interesting. As recently as January 2020, last month, the Kaiser Family Foundation released a poll that indicates that 69% of Americans, of the general population, are in favor of laws that require abortion to be performed by a physician with admitting privileges to a hospital. Common sense. 67% are in favor of that 24-hour waiting period. And upwards of 57% believe that having a physician describe and show an ultrasound to an expectant mother before an abortion is a reasonable law. So in spite of the general will of the people, and certainly the will of the people of Virginia, our General Assembly is moving forward with a very pro-abortion agenda.
What are people saying? Are they being discouraged by this, that this is happening in Virginia, that these things they're trying to push these measures forward?
Well, it is very serious, and we do understand the stakes, Tracy, of course. But, the mood at the march yesterday was really joyful, not because it isn't a challenging time for us, but because we answered the bishop's call to bring Christ to the culture. And what a privileged place we stand in when we shine his light on this darkness. How could we help but be joyful when entrusted with this mandate to shine his light into some very confused times?
What can people do if they want to help out?
Well, that's a great question, because the reality is we can't all get to Richmond to march or to testify, but we all can and must do something. So the first step is to stay engaged. And I understand people don't always enjoy politics, but really we have to answer our baptismal call. We are not baptized into the Father, the Son, and a particular party, right? We're not a political party, we're the church. And so we go forward proclaiming the gospel of life to both sides of the aisle. And we do that by, if you're in Virginia, perhaps following the Virginia Catholic Conference. We have a network at vacatholic.org that will send you updates. And from the comfort of your living room, you can click and send a message. And that's important, to stay engaged and not to go back to sleep. It's often said, but it's often said because it's true, that all that is required for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing. And so we don't want to do nothing. And we can all call our members. We can keep an eye out for when they're home in our districts and go to those meetings and raise our voices for those who cannot speak for themselves. And I think even the homebound and the sick, perhaps especially the homebound and the sick, can join this effort by offering their sufferings prayerfully to get this demon out of our state.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for being on and sharing your insight and telling us a little bit more about what happened yesterday.
Thank you for
in
the
Richmond.
opportunity.
We appreciate it. Thanks so much. Amy McInerny, Director of Respect Life for the Catholic Diocese of Arlington. Thank you again. Our First Lady Melania Trump kept up her Valentine's Day tradition for the third year in a row. She visited with children at the Children's Inn in Bethesda, Maryland.
How are you feeling? Good? Nice to see you.
The First Lady sat with children as they made cards and other Valentine's Day decorations. The Children's Inn at the National Institutes of Health hosts young patients along with their caretakers and families. The First Lady passed around red Valentine's Day cards to each of them before she returned to the White House. We thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. We are back on Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night and God bless.